The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1882, and Zara Lockwood's hands trembled as she read the words that changed everything. Her father was dead, trampled by a spooked horse, and the ranch was hers now whether she wanted it or not. She stood on the dusty platform of the train station in Ely, Nevada, clutching that telegram and a worn carpetbag that held everything she owned. The desert stretched out before her in shades of brown and gold, the spring sun already beating down with a promise of the fierce summer to come. She was 22 years old, raised in a Boston boarding house after her mother died, and she knew absolutely nothing about running a cattle ranch. Her father had left when she was 7, chasing some dream of Western fortune, and now that dream was hers to salvage or surrender. The ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Pete Hawkins, met her with a wagon and a look of barely concealed skepticism. He did not say much on the long ride out to the property, but Zara could read his thoughts clearly enough in the set of his jaw and the way he avoided meeting her eyes. A woman running a ranch, a city woman at that. It was laughable. When they arrived at the Double L Ranch, Zara's heart sank. The house was a weathered structure that leaned slightly to the left, as if exhausted by the constant wind. The barn needed repairs, the fences sagged in places, and the cattle she could see in the distance looked thin. Pete finally spoke as he helped her down from the wagon. "Your father, he meant well, Miss Lockwood, but the drought these past 2 years, it hit him hard. He borrowed money from the bank in town, and well, things were not going so good even before the accident." Pete cleared his throat. "I will be straight with you. The other ranchers, they have been talking. They do not think a woman can hold this place together. Old man Patterson down the valley, he already told folks he gives you 3 months before you sell out to him for pennies on the dollar." Zara felt something harden in her chest. She had spent her whole life being told what she could not do, what was not proper for a woman, what dreams were too big for someone of her station. She looked at the sagging ranch, at the mountains rising purple in the distance, at the endless sky that seemed to promise both freedom and struggle in equal measure. "Then I suppose we had better prove them wrong," she said quietly. Pete's eyebrows rose, but he nodded slowly. "Yes, madam. Though I will tell you true, we are down to just 3 hands besides me. Most of the men left when your father could not pay wages regular. We need at least 6 more to work a spread this size proper." The next few days passed in a blur of harsh realizations. Zara learned that the ranch owed money not just to the bank but to the feed store, the blacksmith, and half the merchants in Ely. The cattle were indeed undernourished. The water rights her father held were being challenged by a neighboring rancher, and the bunkhouse roof had a hole that let in rain and snow. She spent her evenings poring over her father's account books by lamplight, trying to make sense of numbers that never seemed to add up to anything good. On Friday, she rode into town with Pete to meet with the banker, a thin man named Silas Worthington who looked at her as if she were a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. She had found a split riding skirt in her father's house, along with some shirts that she had altered to fit her smaller frame. The banker made it clear that, while he would not foreclose immediately out of respect for her father's memory, she had until the end of October to make the overdue payments or the ranch would be sold at auction. "That is 8 months, Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. 8 months to accomplish what your father could not do in 2 years, Worthington replied, not unkindly. "Miss Lockwood, perhaps it would be wiser to simply sell now. I am sure we could arrange a private sale that would leave you with enough to return east and start fresh." "This is no life for a woman alone." Zara stood, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Worthington. I will see you in October with your money." Outside the bank, she found Pete waiting with the wagon, and beside him stood a man she had not seen before. He was tall, lean in the way of men who work hard for their living, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in shadow. He wore dusty clothes and a hat pulled low against the sun, and when he looked at her, there was no judgment in his gaze, only a quiet assessment that somehow did not make her feel small. "Miss Lockwood, this here is Zachary Irwin," Pete said. "He is looking for work, and I thought you might want to talk to him." Zachary removed his hat, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind but still young, probably not much older than her own 22 years. "Madam," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. "I heard you might be hiring." "What have you heard about me?" Zara asked directly. A flicker of something, maybe respect, crossed his face. "That you are trying to save your father's ranch, that folks think you cannot do it, that you need good hands willing to work hard." "And are you a good hand, Mr. Irwin?" "I am a fair cattleman, a better horse breaker, and I know water and land management better than most," he said without boasting, just stating facts. "I worked for the Rockingham up in Montana until the owner sold out. Been drifting since, looking for a place to settle for a while." "I cannot pay much," Zara said honestly. "Wages might be irregular until I get the ranch back on its feet. I am not looking for much, just fair treatment and a chance to do good work." He paused, then added, "And I do not have any particular opinions about whether a woman can run a ranch. I figure competence is competence, regardless." Zara felt something unclench slightly in her chest. "When can you start?" "Right now, if you need me." They rode back to the ranch together, Zara in the wagon with Pete while Zachary followed on a rangy bay horse that looked as trail-worn as its rider. On the way, Pete filled her in on what he had learned about Zachary Irwin. The man had a reputation as a hard worker, honest but not much for socializing. He had been orphaned young and raised by an uncle who worked cattle drives. He knew the business from the ground up. That evening, after Zachary had settled his horse in the barn and stowed his gear in the bunkhouse, Zara asked him to walk the property with her. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink, and the air finally held a hint of coolness after the hot day. "Tell me the truth," she said as they stood on a rise overlooking the ranch. "Can this place be saved?" Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the land with the practiced assessment of someone who understood it. "That depends on how willing you are to work and how much trust you have in the people helping you," he finally said. "You have got good grazing land here, better than some I have seen. The problem is water and management. Your father, from what Pete told me, he tried to run the ranch the way he ran it 20 years ago, did not adapt to the changing conditions. The drought hit hard, but it is not permanent. If you can get through this year, if you can improve your water situation and manage your herd smarter, then yes. This place can not only be saved, it can thrive." "How do I do that?" Zara asked. "You listen to the land and you listen to people who know it. You make hard choices, and you do not give up, even when everyone is telling you to quit." He glanced at her then, and in the fading light she saw understanding in his eyes. "You have been told to quit things before, have you not?" "My whole life," she admitted. "What makes you think this time will be different? Because you are here," he said simply. "You could have sold out already, taken what money you could get and gone back to wherever you came from. But you are here, asking me how to save this place. That tells me something." Over the next few weeks, Zara learned more about ranching than she had thought possible. Zachary proved to be not just a skilled worker but a patient teacher. He showed her how to read the signs of healthy cattle versus sick ones, how to judge grazing land, how to fix fences and mend tack. He taught her to ride properly, Not the side-saddle way she had been taught in Boston's riding academies, but the practical way that let her actually work from horseback. The other ranch hands, initially skeptical, began to warm to her when they saw she was willing to do the hard work alongside them. She mucked stalls, helped with branding, learned to cook for the crew when the cook they could barely afford took sick for 3 days. Her hands developed blisters that turned to calluses. Her skin, despite her best efforts with bonnets, bronzed under the relentless sun. But it was with Zachary that she spent the most time, and as April melted into May, Zara began to realize that what she felt for him was moving beyond simple gratitude. There was something about the way he listened when she spoke, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. The way he never talked down to her, but also did not hesitate to correct her when she was wrong, treating her like a partner in the work, rather than either a helpless female or a boss to be deferred to mindlessly. One evening in late May, they were working together to repair a section of fence in the far pasture when a sudden spring storm rolled in, the kind that appeared out of nowhere in the desert. The sky went dark green and the wind picked up, bringing fat raindrops that quickly turned into a downpour. They ran for the line shack, a small cabin used by cowboys during roundup, arriving soaked and breathless. Inside, Zachary got a fire going in the small stove while Zara wrung out her hair and tried not to shiver in her wet clothes. The rain hammered on the roof and lightning flickered through the single window. "We might be here a while," Zachary said, setting a battered coffee pot on the stove. "These storms, they either blow through fast or settle in for hours." Zara wrapped a dusty blanket around her shoulders and sat on the rickety chair near the stove. "Zachary, can I ask you something?" "Sure," he said, settling onto the floor with his back against the wall, seemingly unbothered by his wet clothes. "Why did you really stop here?" "A man with your skills could find work anywhere, probably for better pay and more regular wages. Why take a chance on a failing ranch run by a woman who does not know what she is doing?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because I know what it is like to have everyone expect you to fail. My uncle, he took me in when my folks died, but he never let me forget I was charity. Every rancher I worked for after I left him, they saw me as just another drifter, not worth investing in, not worth teaching properly. I learned anyway, proved myself anyway, but I never forgot what it felt like to have people look at you and assume you are not good enough." He looked up at her then, and in his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own struggles. "When Pete told me about you, about what you were trying to do, I figured maybe here was someone who would not judge me for where I came from. And maybe, just maybe, I could help someone else prove all those doubting voices wrong." "You have helped me," Zara said softly, "more than you know. I would have given up already if not for you." "No," Zachary said with certainty. "You would not have. You have got steel in you, Zara Lockwood. I just helped you figure out how to use it." It was the first time he had called her by her first name, and the sound of it in his low voice made something flutter in her chest. The storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, with the fire crackling and his steady presence across from her, Zara felt safer than she had in months. They talked through the storm, really talked, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Zachary told her about growing up on the move, never having a real home, dreaming of someday having land of his own. Zara told him about the loneliness of the boarding house, about a father she barely remembered, about arriving here and feeling simultaneously terrified and oddly free. By the time the rain stopped, and they rode back to the main ranch under a sky washed clean and full of stars, something had shifted between them. It was there in the way he helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary at her waist. It was there in the way she found herself looking for him first thing each morning, the way her day felt more complete when they worked side by side. June brought new challenges. The neighboring rancher, Patterson, made good on his campaign against her, spreading rumors in town that she was running the double L into further debt, that she was working her men too hard for too little pay, that it was only a matter of time before she lost everything. When Zara went to town for supplies, she felt the stares, heard the whispers. Worse, Patterson's men started making trouble. Fence lines got cut. Cattle wandered onto his property and he impounded them, demanding fees Zara could barely afford. Water from the creek that fed her best pasture suddenly got diverted, and she suspected Patterson was behind it but could not prove it. Through it all, Zachary remained steady. When Zara wanted to confront Patterson directly, Zachary counseled patience and strategy instead. Men like him, they want you to react with anger, he said. They want an excuse to say you are hysterical, that you cannot handle the pressure. We are going to be smarter than that. Together, they rode out before dawn to track where the water was being diverted. They found a makeshift dam on what should have been open range, clearly built by Patterson's crew. Instead of tearing it down immediately, Zachary suggested they document it, get witnesses. They brought Pete and the other hands, had them see it with their own eyes, then filed a complaint with the land management office in Ely. It was not dramatic or satisfying in the moment, but it was effective. The land agent came out, verified the illegal diversion, and ordered it removed. Patterson was furious, but there was nothing he could do without admitting to the violation. You see, Zachary said as they watched Patterson's men dismantle the dam, sometimes the best victory is the one where you use the law instead of your fists. Where did you learn to think like this? Zara asked, genuinely curious. From making mistakes and paying for them, he said with a slight smile. I used to be hot-headed, quick to anger, got me into trouble more than once. Learned the hard way that smart beats strong almost every time. In July, the heat intensified, and with it came the real test of the ranch's survival. The cattle needed to be moved to higher pastures where the grass was still decent, which meant a drive through some of the roughest country around. Pete frankly told Zara that he doubted they had enough hands to make it safely. Then we hire more, Zara said, though she knew the money was not there. Who is going to work for a ranch that might not exist in 3 months? Pete asked, not unkindly. Zachary, who had been studying a map of the route, looked up. I know some men, good cowboys, who are between jobs. If I vouch for them, tell them this is a worthwhile fight, they might sign on for the drive at least. After that, if we get the cattle moved successful, maybe some of them will stay on. Why would they trust your word? Zara asked. Because I have worked with most of them at one time or another, and they know I do not lie or waste their time. He met her eyes. Let me ride out, talk to them. Give me 3 days. Zara wanted to say no, wanted to tell him she needed him here, but she knew he was right. 3 days, she agreed. He left that afternoon, and Zara was surprised by how much she missed him. The ranch felt different without his presence, less steady somehow. She threw herself into work, organizing the supplies for the drive, working with Pete on the route planning, checking and rechecking the equipment. On the evening of the 3rd day, just as the sun was setting, she heard horses approaching. She stepped out of the house to see Zachary riding in, and behind him came 4 cowboys, dusty and trail-worn but sitting their horses with the easy competence of experienced men. Zachary swung down from his horse and walked over to her, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Miss Lockwood, I would like to introduce you to your drive crew. These men have all worked major drives, they know the country, and they are willing to sign on for fair wages, and a chance to be part of something worth doing. The cowboys introduced themselves. Tom Brennan, a quiet man in his 40s with a scar across his cheek. Young Billy Cooper, barely 20 but said to be magic with horses. Sam Chen, whose family had come from China to work the railroad and who had found his calling with cattle. And Miguel Ortiz, who had worked ranches all through California and Nevada and knew the land like his own hand. Over dinner that night, squeezed around the small table in the ranch house, the men asked questions about the drive, the route, the condition of the cattle. Zara answered honestly, hiding nothing about the difficulties they faced. When she finished, Tom Brennan leaned back in his chair. "So what you are saying is, this is going to be hard, dangerous. We might not get paid regular and half the territory thinks you are going to fail," he said. "That about sums it up," Zara agreed. Tom looked at the other men, then back at her. "Well then, I guess we had better make sure you succeed. Hate to prove all those fools right." The cattle drive began on a Tuesday in mid-July, just as the heat was reaching its peak. They pushed 200 head of cattle toward the higher pastures, a journey that would take nearly 2 weeks through difficult terrain. Zara insisted on going along, despite Pete's protests that it was not proper and Zachary's quieter concerns about the dangers. "This is my ranch, my cattle, my future," she told them both. "I am going." The drive was harder than anything Zara had ever done. The days started before dawn and ended long after dark. The cattle were ornery from the heat, and the desert terrain was treacherous, full of gullies and loose rock. Dust filled every breath and the sun beat down without mercy. But there were moments of beauty too. Nights camped under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. The sound of the cattle settling down for the night, the low songs the cowboys sang to keep them calm. The way the land changed as they climbed higher, the desert giving way to juniper and pine, the air cooling slightly. Zachary rode near her most days, and at night around the fire they often ended up sitting next to each other, their shoulders almost touching as they ate their simple meals of beans and coffee. One night, when she was on watch with him, riding slow circles around the sleeping herd, he told her about the first drive he had ever been on, barely 14 years old, and terrified he would do something wrong. "I had never been so scared or so excited in my life," he said. "It felt like being part of something bigger than myself, something that mattered. I have been chasing that feeling ever since." "Have you found it again?" Zara asked. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Yeah, I think maybe I have." Something in his tone made her heart skip, but before she could respond, one of the cattle stirred and they had to circle wider, and the moment passed. On the 8th day of the drive, they hit trouble. A rattlesnake spooked the lead steers, and suddenly the whole herd was moving, not quite a stampede but close enough. Zara found herself riding hard, trying to turn the leaders, her heart pounding in her throat. She could hear the other cowboys shouting, see them riding like fury to contain the cattle. Then her horse stumbled, and for a terrifying second she thought she was going down, thought she would fall right in the path of 200 panicked cattle. But strong hands grabbed her arm, steadying her, and she looked over to see Zachary riding next to her, his face grim with concentration. "Stay with me," he shouted over the thunder of hooves. "We are going to turn them together. On my signal, push your horse hard to the left." She nodded, trusting him completely. When he shouted "now," they both pushed, their horses responding gamely, and somehow, miraculously, the lead steers began to turn. The other cowboys took advantage, pressing the turn, and gradually the herd slowed, the panic fading. When it was over, when the cattle were finally settled again, Zara found herself shaking with delayed fear. Zachary dismounted and came over to her, reaching up to help her down from her horse. "You did good," he said, his hand still on her waist even though her feet were on the ground. You did real good, Zara. She looked up at him, at the concern and something deeper in his eyes, and before she could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he froze, and she thought she had made a terrible mistake. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he was kissing her back with a hunger that matched her own. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or questioning. It was a kiss of two people who had been holding back too long, who needed each other like the desert needed rain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since about the second day I met you," he admitted roughly. "Why did you not?" she asked. "Because you are the boss. Because I did not want you to think I was just another man trying to take advantage. Because I wanted you to be sure." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Are you sure, Zara?" "I have never been more sure of anything," she said, and kissed him again. They kept their relationship quiet for the rest of the drive, but the other men were not fools. They saw the way Zachary and Zara looked at each other, the way they seemed to move in sync. If they had opinions, they kept them to themselves, though Tom Brennan told Zara one morning that Zachary Irwin was as good a man as she was likely to find, and if she was smart, she would hold on to him. They reached the high pastures on the 14th day, and the cattle spread out eagerly across the better grazing land. It was a moment of genuine triumph. They had done what many thought impossible, moved the herd without losing a single head in brutal heat through difficult country. That night, the crew celebrated with a bottle of whiskey that Miguel had been saving. They built a bigger fire than usual, told stories, laughed at shared jokes. Zara sat next to Zachary, his hand finding hers in the darkness, and felt something she had not felt in years: hope. When the others finally turned in, Zachary and Zara stayed by the dying fire. The night was cool at this elevation, and she shivered slightly. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "What happens when we get back?" she asked quietly. "What do you want to happen?" he countered. "I want you to stay, not just as a hand but as a partner, in the ranch and in everything else." She turned to look at him. "Is that crazy? We have only known each other a few months." "Some people know each other for years and never really see each other," Zachary said. "I see you, Zara. I see how hard you work, how much courage it takes for you to keep going when everyone is betting against you. I see your kindness with the animals, your fairness with the men, your stubbornness when you know you are right. I see you, and I do not think it is crazy at all. The other ranchers, they already say terrible things about me. If we are together, if we are not married, it will only be worse," Zara said, voicing the practical concern that had been nagging at her. "Then we get married," Zachary said simply. "If you will have me. I do not have much to offer besides hard work and a promise to stand by you no matter what, but those things I can give you absolutely." Zara felt tears sting her eyes. "That is more than I ever thought I would have. Yes, Zachary Irwin, I will marry you." They kissed under the stars, and Zara thought about how strange life was, how just a few months ago she had been a lonely woman in Boston with no prospects and no future. And now she was here, in the wild country, with a man she loved and a dream that felt almost within reach. They returned to the ranch in early August to find both good news and bad. The good news was that the high pastures had been the right choice. The cattle would fatten up there and be in good shape for sale in the fall. The bad news was that Patterson had been busy in their absence, buying up water rights and spreading more rumors. Worse, he had made a formal complaint to the territorial authorities that Zara was operating the ranch unlawfully, claiming that as a woman, she should have a male guardian to manage her financial affairs. "It is garbage," Pete told them angrily. "Pure garbage meant to harass you. But it means you have to go to the territorial capital, defend yourself before a judge." Zara felt the old fear try to take hold, but then Zachary squeezed her hand. "When do we leave?" he asked. The hearing was set for late August in Carson City, which meant a hard journey across some of the roughest territory in Nevada. Zara and Zachary made the trip together, along with Pete, who insisted on coming as a witness to Zara's competence. Carson City was bigger than Ely, bustling with miners and merchants and all the rough energy of a territory still finding itself. The hearing was held in a stuffy courtroom on a scorching afternoon. Patterson had paid for a lawyer, a slick man from back east who argued that women were naturally unsuited to business, that Zara was being taken advantage of by unscrupulous men, that the kindest thing would be to appoint a guardian to protect her interests. Zara sat through the testimony feeling her anger build. When it was finally her turn to speak, she stood and faced the judge, a weathered man who looked like he had seen it all. "Your Honor, I came to Nevada with nothing but a failing ranch and a lot of people telling me to quit. In 5 months, I have paid down my debt, improved the property, successfully completed a difficult cattle drive, and hired good men who are willing to work for me because they respect what I am building. I keep my own books, make my own decisions, and yes, I consult with people who know more than I do because that is what smart business people do, male or female." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Mr. Patterson is not concerned with my well-being. He wants my ranch at a price he can steal it for. He wants me to fail because it offends him that a woman might succeed where he expected failure. Do not give him what he wants, Your Honor. Judge me on my actions, not my gender." The judge listened to closing arguments, then took less than 5 minutes to deliberate. "I find no evidence that Miss Lockwood is incompetent or in need of a guardian. Her affairs appear to be well managed, and last I checked, this territory does not have laws preventing women from owning property or running businesses. Complaint dismissed." Outside the courthouse, Zara felt almost dizzy with relief. Zachary pulled her into a brief hug, then stepped back, mindful of propriety in the busy street. "You were magnificent," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "We need to get married," Zara said suddenly. "Not just because of the gossip, but because I want to. I want everyone to know that we are partners in every way." They found a minister that afternoon, with Pete standing witness, and got married in a simple ceremony in a small church on the edge of town. Zara wore the one nice dress she had brought, and Zachary had borrowed a clean shirt from Pete. It was not fancy or elaborate, but when Zachary slipped a simple gold band on her finger and promised to love her through all the hardships to come, Zara felt like she was part of something magic. That night, in a small hotel room that was the closest thing to a honeymoon they could afford, Zachary held her close and whispered, "I promise I will build you a real life, Zara Irwin. Not just a surviving ranch, but something thriving. A real home." "We will build it together," she corrected, and kissed him until words did not matter anymore. They returned to the Double L Ranch as husband and wife, and if some of the other ranchers had opinions about how quickly they had married, Zara found she did not care. She had Zachary by her side, and that made everything else manageable. September brought the hard work of preparing for the fall sales. They brought the cattle down from the high pastures, and Zara was thrilled to see how much better they looked, how much weight they had put on. Tom Brennan and the other drive cowboys had agreed to stay on permanently, impressed by the victory in Carson City, and by the obvious improvements being made to the ranch. With more hands, they were able to tackle larger projects. They repaired the barn properly, fixed all the fencing, even started building a new bunkhouse so the men would have better quarters. Zachary proved to have a talent for organization, creating systems for managing the work that made everything run more smoothly. In October, they held the cattle sale, and Zara's heart pounded as the bidding started. The cattle looked good, healthy and well-fed, and the buyers noticed. The prices came in higher than she had dared hope. When the final tally was counted, she had enough to pay off the bank, settle all her father's debts, and still have money left over for operations through the winter. The banker, Worthington, actually smiled when she walked into his office with the payment. "I confess, Miss Lockwood, or should I say Mrs. Irwin, I did not think you would make it. I am pleased to be proven wrong." "So am I," Zara said with feeling. Word spread quickly through Ely that the Double L had not only survived but had turned a profit. The other ranchers who had bet on her failure were forced to acknowledge that she had proven them wrong. Even Patterson, though he glared at her when they crossed paths in town, could not deny that she had legitimately succeeded. But Zara and Zachary were not content with mere survival. Through the fall and winter, they worked on a plan to not just maintain the ranch, but to make it thrive. Zachary had ideas about breeding programs, about improving their water management even further, about diversifying beyond just cattle. "Horses," he said one evening as they sat together going over plans. "Good horses are always in demand, and we have the land for it. If we start small, build a reputation for quality, we could have a secondary income stream that would make us more stable." "You know horses well enough?" Zara asked. "Better than I know cattle," Zachary admitted. "It was always my first love. I've got ideas about bloodlines, about what would work well in this climate." "Then let us do it," Zara decided. Winter was harsh that year, but the ranch weathered it well. They had hay stored, the buildings were sound, and the crew worked together like a well-oiled machine. Zara and Zachary settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits. He was an early riser. She liked to read late at night. He was naturally neat. She tended toward organized chaos. But they fit together in the ways that mattered, in their shared vision for the ranch, in their respect for each other's strengths, in the quiet contentment they found in each other's company. In February, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening as they sat by the fire, suddenly nervous about how he would react. They had not talked about children, had been too focused on saving the ranch. "A baby," Zachary said, his eyes widening. Then a slow smile spread across his face and he pulled her close. "A baby." "Zara, that is wonderful. Are you happy about it?" "I am terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I am happy." "Are you?" "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "I am going to have a family, a real family. Yes, I am happy. I am so happy I can barely stand it." The pregnancy progressed through the spring as the ranch came back to life. They moved the cattle back to the lower pastures, started working with the first horses Zachary had purchased for his breeding program. Zara worked as long as she could, though eventually Zachary and Pete insisted she take it easier. "You have already proven you are tough," Zachary told her. "You do not need to prove it anymore. Let the rest of us handle the heavy work." Their daughter was born in late September of 1883, during a fierce autumn storm. The midwife from town barely made it in time, and Zara labored through the night while the wind howled outside. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and screaming, Zachary held her with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. "She is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name her?" They had argued over names for weeks, but looking at her daughter's tiny face, Zara suddenly knew. "Rose." "After my mother." "Rose Irwin," Zachary said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, Rose. Welcome to the ranch." The first year with a baby was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Rose was a colicky infant who did not sleep through the night, and Zara often felt like she was stumbling through her days on too little rest. But watching Zachary with their daughter, Seeing his fierce gentleness as he rocked her to sleep or changed her diaper without complaint only made Zara love him more. The ranch continued to improve. The horse breeding program was showing promise, with several buyers already interested in the foals that would be born the following spring. They hired a few more hands, built another barn specifically for the horses, and started making plans for expanding their grazing land. In the summer of 1884, Patterson finally admitted defeat. His own ranch had been declining for years, and facing mounting debts, he sold out to a cattle syndicate from back east. Before he left, he stopped by the Double L, finding Zara and Zachary working together to gentle a young horse. "I was wrong about you," he said gruffly. "I thought you would fail because you were a woman, but you succeeded because you were smart enough to get help, stubborn enough to keep going, and lucky enough to find a good partner. That last part, that is what really makes a ranch work." After he left, Zachary turned to Zara with a questioning look. "Did he just apologize?" "I think he did," Zara said, still surprised. "Are you going to gloat?" "Maybe a little," she admitted, and they both laughed. By 1885, the Double L Ranch was recognized as one of the best-run operations in the region. Zara's horses were starting to build a reputation, and the cattle operation was solidly profitable. They had paid off every debt, improved every building, and even had money saved for the future. Other women, hearing about Zara's success, sometimes wrote to her asking for advice on running ranches or businesses. She always wrote back, encouraging them, sharing what she had learned. She knew how much it meant to have someone believe you could succeed when the whole world was telling you to quit. In the spring of 1886, Zara found herself pregnant again. This time she was less terrified, more excited. Rose was almost 3, a wild-haired little girl who followed her father everywhere and was already showing an uncanny talent with horses. Their son was born in January of 1887, during a rare snowstorm that blanketed the desert in white. He was bigger than Rose had been, with a shock of dark hair and his father's steady gaze. They named him James, after Zachary's father, whom he had barely known but remembered as kind. Watching Zachary with both children, seeing the family they had built together, Zara sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was real. The scared young woman who had arrived in Ely less than 5 years ago felt like a different person entirely. One evening in the summer of 1887, Zara and Zachary stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over their land. Rose was playing in the yard with one of the ranch dogs, and James was asleep in his cradle inside. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving. "Do you remember what you said to me the first day I got here?" Zara asked. "When I asked if this place could be saved? I said it depended on how willing you were to work and how much you trusted the people helping you," Zachary recalled. "You were right. But it was not just about the ranch, was it? It was about everything, our life, our family, all of it. We built this together." Zachary pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We did, and we are not done yet. I have been thinking there is some land adjacent to ours coming up for sale. If we could acquire it, we could expand significantly." "Are you ever satisfied?" Zara teased. "With you, always. With the ranch, there is always room to grow, to improve." He paused. "But only if you want to. If you want to just maintain what we have, I am fine with that too." Zara thought about it, watching the golden light spill across their land. 5 years ago, she had wanted nothing more than to simply survive, to prove she could hold on to what her father had left her. But now, with Zachary beside her and their children playing nearby, survival was not enough. She wanted to build something lasting, something extraordinary. "Let us look at the land," she said. "Let us keep building." The years flowed by like water, each bringing new challenges and new triumphs. They acquired the adjacent land, expanding the Double L until it was one of the largest ranches in the region. The horse breeding program became renowned, with buyers coming from as far as California and Colorado to purchase Irwin horses. They built a proper ranch house to replace the old leaning structure, a beautiful home with space for their growing family. 2 more children came, another daughter they named Clara in 1889, and a final son, Samuel, in 1892. The house was full of noise and laughter, the sound of children running through rooms, playing in the yard, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Zara became known throughout the territory not just as a successful rancher, but as a businesswoman who was generous with her knowledge. She hired women when she could, believing that everyone deserved a chance to prove themselves. She spoke at gatherings, wrote articles for newspapers about ranch management, and never forgot what it had felt like to have everyone betting against her. Zachary proved to be not just a partner in business but a true partner in life. He never pulled rank as the husband, never tried to take credit for Zara's ideas or diminish her contributions. They made decisions together, argued when they disagreed, but always with the understanding that they were on the same team. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Zachary surprised Zara by commissioning a new sign for the ranch entrance. When he unveiled it, she gasped. It read, "Double L Ranch, founded by Zara Lockwood Irwin and Zachary Irwin, 1882. You founded this place," he said simply. "I just helped you build it. I wanted everyone to know that." Zara hugged him tight, overwhelmed with love for this man who saw her so clearly, who had believed in her when she barely believed in herself, who had helped her build not just a ranch but a life beyond her wildest dreams. Rose grew into a young woman with her mother's determination and her father's way with horses. She announced at 16 that she intended to start her own horse training business, and her parents supported her completely. James was quieter, thoughtful, fascinated by the business side of ranching. Clara was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and exploring the hills. And Samuel, the baby, was gentle and kind, content to spend hours in the barn caring for the animals. In 1897, 15 years after Zara had arrived in Ely with nothing but a failing ranch and a determination to prove everyone wrong, the Double L hosted a massive celebration. They invited everyone, from the townspeople who had once doubted her to the ranch hands who had helped build the operation to the other ranchers, who had eventually become friends and allies. As Zara stood with Zachary, watching their friends and family celebrate on the land they had built together, she thought about how impossibly far she had come. She was 40 years old, the owner of one of the most successful ranches in Nevada, the mother of 4 incredible children and the wife of the best man she had ever known. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist. "That I am grateful," Zara said simply, "for all of it. The struggles, the successes, but mostly for you. You helped me build this, but more than that, you helped me build myself into someone stronger than I ever thought I could be." "You were always strong," Zachary said. "You just needed someone to help you see it, and you helped me too, Zara. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything I ever wanted and a lot of things I did not even know I needed." They kissed there in front of everyone, and their friends whooped and applauded. Rose rolled her eyes in teenage embarrassment, but she was smiling. The younger children giggled and danced around them. As the party continued into the warm summer night, with lanterns strung between the trees and fiddle music floating on the air, Zara felt a deep contentment. The other ranchers had said she would never make it, that a woman alone could not possibly succeed in this harsh land. They had been wrong. not because she was alone, but because she had been smart enough, brave enough, to accept the help of a good man who saw her as an equal. Together, they had built not just the best spread around, but a life rich with love, purpose, and the satisfaction of proving that with courage and partnership, anything was possible. The Double L Ranch stood as testament to what could be achieved when two people believed in each other as much as they believed in themselves, when they worked side by side through drought and storm, through doubt and challenge, building something that would last for generations. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations, of hard work and harder-won rewards. Rose did indeed start her horse training business, becoming renowned in her own right, eventually marrying a young veterinarian who shared her passion for horses. James took over more of the ranch's business operations, showing a keen mind for numbers and negotiations that made Zara proud. Clara surprised everyone by developing an interest in engineering, fascinated by the new technologies emerging at the turn of the century, particularly those involving irrigation and water management. Samuel remained the gentle soul, becoming the ranch's primary animal caretaker, knowing each horse and cow by name and temperament. In 1902, 20 years after Zara had first arrived in Ely, a journalist from San Francisco came to interview her for a story about successful businesswomen in the West. Sitting on the porch of the beautiful ranch house, with Zachary working with horses in the corral nearby and her children scattered across the property engaged in various tasks, Zara reflected on the question the journalist asked. What was the key to your success? Zara thought carefully before answering. I think it was understanding that accepting help is not weakness, it is wisdom. When I arrived here, I knew nothing about ranching. I could have let pride prevent me from learning, from listening, from building partnerships. Instead, I found people who believed in the work, who were willing to teach me, and who saw me as a person rather than just a woman trying to do a man's job. She glanced at Zachary, who had paused in his work to smile at her. But mostly, it was finding a partner who never once made me feel less than equal, who helped me build not just a ranch but a real partnership. That is what the Double L really is, a partnership built on respect, hard work, and love. The journalist wrote a glowing article that was published in newspapers across the West, and Zara received letters from women all over the country, thanking her for proving what was possible, for showing that women could build empires if given the chance. By 1905, the ranch had expanded far beyond what Zara had ever imagined. They employed over 30 people full-time, ran several thousand head of cattle, and their horse breeding operation was internationally recognized. They had built a small village on the property, with housing for the workers, a school for their children, even a small medical clinic staffed by a nurse who had come west seeking adventure and found purpose instead. Zara was in her late 40s now, her hair showing silver threads, her hands permanently marked by years of work. Zachary, in his 40s as well, had a few more lines around his eyes, but his smile was as warm as ever, his dedication to the ranch and their family unwavering. One spring evening in 1906, as they sat together on the porch watching yet another sunset paint the desert in impossible colors, Zachary took Zara's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming here, taking on this impossible challenge?" "Never," Zara said without hesitation. "Every struggle, every moment when I wanted to quit, every person who told me I would fail, it all led me here to this life with you." "How could I regret that?" "I love you, Zara Irwin," Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. "I loved you when you were a scared young woman trying to save a failing ranch. I loved you when you were fighting to prove yourself. I love you now as a successful rancher, a mother, a woman who has achieved more than anyone thought possible. I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Zara replied, tears streaming down her face. You saw me when no one else did. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. You stood beside me through everything. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family, of their youngest children arguing good-naturedly over something, of Clara explaining some new irrigation concept she had read about, of Rose stopping by with her husband and their first child, Zara and Zachary's first grandchild. The Double L Ranch stood strong and prosperous, a testament to determination, partnership, and love. The other ranchers had said she would never make it, but Zara Lockwood had not just made it, she had built something extraordinary. And she had done it with Zachary Irwin by her side, a cowboy who had seen her potential when others saw only limitations, who had helped her build the best spread around, and more importantly, had helped her build a life worth living. As the years continued to unfold, they faced new challenges as the West changed and modernized. Automobiles began to replace horses on roads, new ranching techniques emerged, markets shifted. But through it all, Zara and Zachary adapted together, always learning, always growing, always supporting each other. In 1910, as they approached their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire community of Ely threw them a celebration. The town had grown significantly, and the Double L Ranch was seen as one of the foundation stones of the local economy. The mayor gave a speech about how Zara Irwin had not only built a successful business, but had paved the way for other women in the territory, proving that gender was no barrier to success. Their 4 children, all adults now with lives and dreams of their own, stood together to toast their parents. Rose spoke for all of them, her voice carrying across the crowded town hall. Our parents taught us that success is not about doing things the way they have always been done, but about finding what works, being willing to learn, and never giving up on your dreams. They taught us that true partnership means respecting each other's strengths, supporting each other's weaknesses, and always working toward a common goal. They built the Double L Ranch, yes, but more than that, they built a family and a legacy that will continue for generations. Zara looked at Zachary through tears of joy, and he squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. They had built something that would outlast them, not just in the land and the cattle and the horses, but in their children and grandchildren, in the example they had set, in the lives they had touched. As the celebration continued into the night, with music and dancing and laughter filling the hall, Zara reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Nevada 28 years ago with nothing but a telegram announcing her father's death and a determination born of desperation. She had been told repeatedly that she would fail, that a woman could not run a ranch, that she should give up and go back east where she belonged. Instead, she had found Zachary, a cowboy looking for a place to belong, who had seen past her gender to the person underneath, who had believed in her vision and helped her make it real. Together, they had transformed a failing ranch into a thriving enterprise, raised 4 children, built a community, and created a love story for the ages. The desert that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving when she first arrived had become home. The work that had seemed impossible had become her passion. The life she had stumbled into reluctantly had become the only life she could imagine living. And through it all, Zachary had been there, steady and true, her partner in every sense of the word. They had built the best spread around not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, though there had been plenty of those, but through daily acts of partnership, through small kindnesses and large sacrifices, through unwavering commitment to each other and to their shared dream. As Zara and Zachary danced together under the lantern light, holding each other close as they had for nearly 30 years, surrounded by their family and friends, the journey felt complete. She had proven everyone wrong, but more importantly, she had proven something to herself, that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, especially when she had the right partner by her side. The other ranchers had said she would never make it. The cowboy had helped her build the best spread around. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was that together they had built a life filled with love, purpose, and the deep satisfaction of dreams achieved and promises kept. And that, Zara thought as she smiled up at her husband, was the greatest success of all.